Hello, Julie. Here we
Hello,
are,
Sarah.
March.
Yes, it's the trade wars. We have just entered the declaration of war, only it's trade wars. Venus is trade, Aries is war, Venus is retrograde. It's a cluster, you know what? Because like if you really wanted to have a successful trade war, you'd wait till Venus was direct.
Right. But who would be like the person starting it or the person engaging? I mean,
Well, if I was going to start a trade war that I wanted to win,
yeah.
I wouldn't do it when Venus was retrograde. Just saying. And
I,
Mercury's about to go retrograde. It's going to be, I think it's going to be, I've been saying this for a while now, that March is the worst month of the year. And here we are.
we're doing it. We're in it.
We're
So if
in
it's the
it.
worst,
We're almost through it. March is almost over. It's March 4th.
get into it and get over it as quickly as
Yeah.
possible.
Yeah, get into it and get over it. I think we're into it
Yeah.
and it's scary. I think it's scaring everyone for good reason. I don't
Yeah.
think, I don't want to say to people, your anxiety, you have to deal with your anxiety. It's all in your head. No, no, no. We have reason to be anxious and it's kind of, nothing to laugh about, but I'm laughing anyway. Um, but the things that we're dealing with are Venus retrograde, Mercury retrograde, in Aries, back to Pisces, and Neptune leaving Pisces, going into Aries on March 30th.
Okay, so the hot spot right now, I mean, there's a few, but the main hot spot is the doorway
Yes.
between Pisces and Aries, which is, if you could explain, like, what is the significance of anything moving from Pisces into Aries? And then we can talk about the long procession of planets that are moving from Pisces to Aries.
Right. They've been making a lot. I haven't seen it because the sky's been so overcast, but you can see in the sky in the evening, there's quite the lineup of planets. So, you could think of the cusp between Pisces and Aries, like the way it feels to be floating around in the amniotic fluid in Pisces and suddenly to be sucked into a bunch of contractions and shot, out in Aries. So Aries is birth, but
Right.
Pisces is that kind of nebulous. So when you're in that period of when a being is in that period of gestation at the end of gestation, your whole reality is that you've been floating in amniotic fluid for 9 months, but it's getting a little tight,
Mm.
right? And so that the cusp between Pisces and Aries is that place where it's like, oh my God, I'm gonna have to get out of here, right? And then the contractions, and then the transition, and then the birth.
Yes.
That's right. You got it. So
And
we're
then the
in there.
cold, bright lights.
Yeah. So we're not born yet, though. We're being squeezed. Who knows? This doesn't feel like it's going to be an at-home underwater birth. This feels a little bit more stressful than that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess that's a great analogy because we really are feeling this like uncomfortable, like, wow, we're gonna have to like things are starting to not feel comfortable here. And every day on the news, like I
Right.
go to
And
the
if
doctor, I
you've
go to
been listening, the
yeah,
idea is in March, we have to really come to terms with the fact of what is lost because it's permanently lost, right? Which isn't the same as saying, I know what's on the other side of it. I don't. I don't know. I think there's a lot of things that will happen that aren't the way it feels right now. But I think that it's very important to grieve before we pick up our pitchforks
right.
and hold
About
the enemy at bay. Yes, right.
about like the grief about everything that is leaving, is going the old ways.
I think, yeah, I don't think we're ever going to make anything great again. I think we're going to have to go forward. And I think that it's easy to say to a person, you have to grieve your losses. It's not that easy to say to a culture, you have to grieve your losses.
Right.
It's Western civilization. It's,
Mhm.
oh my God, the big end game of the age of Pisces has been greed, not compassion,
Yeah.
right? It's like that's horrifying. And
It
we're
is.
all here in it. We've all been, at some level, a part of it. It's too
Yeah.
much to understand in words.
Mhm. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
And you have to, and then we're being kind of, I guess through March, that's when we make the transition into Aries, and it's a big deal because it's a
Well,
generation.
March is particularly difficult because Venus and Mercury are retrograde in across the Aries Pisces point. And so
Right,
at the end of March, Venus will conjunct the sun, which happens every time there's a retrograde. That's like Venus in the underworld. Mercury will conjunct the sun. So that's where they change from being evening stars to becoming morning stars. Morning
okay,
star, Venus, and Mercury are much more determined than evening star, right?
right,
So evening star is kind of like, Venus is at her brightest, right, when
right.
she's retrograde, when she starts to retrograde, and then she gets dimmer and dimmer, right? She loses her crown and her necklace and her breastplate and her rings and her gown, right? So the story of Inanna is she's naked and bowed low. And that naked and bowed low moment is Venus conjunct the sun. But in the
What is that?
same period, Venus conjuncts the sun in Aries, but Venus conjuncts Neptune days later in Pisces because
That's
it's
so crazy.
retrograde still. Isn't that wild?
It's just like you can picture like this this bridge going from Pisces to Aries, almost like a drawbridge or something, joining two states and all of this activity happening back and forth over this
Right.
passage.
So
Yeah,
uh, we feel threatened individually,
right.
but we are living at the time of great change, right? It was inevitable. Everything ends, and so does patriarchy.
Yeah.
But we don't know how we're going to get where we'd like to be, right? Some of us would like,
Or what replaces it?
yeah,
What
some
replaces
of us would like
patriarchy?
oligarchy, and some of us would like, humanitarian food for everyone. There's real differing opinions about how we're going to go. And the algorithm, of course, is right there in the midst. But I just want to say that
Yeah.
Venus and Mercury will do their thing. Neptune will move into Aries. But then at the end of May, Saturn goes into Aries. And Saturn's like the cleanup committee. Saturn says, okay, this is the war that you're in. This is what's actually happening. But they both, Saturn and Neptune, go back into Pisces later in the year. And they don't actually get going in Aries full tilt boogie until the end of January and the middle of February in 2026.
Okay. So by then we're fully birthed.
Then we're born, yeah. Then we're definitely on our way, yeah. We're on our way. I mean, Pluto went into Aquarius. That was part one.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is part two. And then there's Uranus going into Gemini, and that would be part three. Sorry about that.
Okay. So you know, i- is it common to have like this Mars retrograde is like we've come out of retrograde with Mars and we're still in the shadow, so it hasn't completed. So we're kind of like finishing up this Mars retrograde while the Venus retrograde starts, while the Mercury retrograde starts. Is this very uncommon to have that many retrogrades happening at the same time?
Venus and Mercury when Venus is retrograde, there's usually a Mercury retrograde in there because Venus and Mercury are never far away from the sun. Mars
Right.
can show
Okay.
up anytime. So
Yeah.
that's more synchronistic. Um, and Mars was all about the American election. It's all about Trudeau stepping down. It's all about and the scariest thing about Mars and Cancer, I guess, is that tribal thing, because Cancer has to do with our who our people are.
Right.
Um,
We're
and
definitely,
hopefully, now that Mars is direct, we're not just all devolving into our silos of refusing to talk to each other. That's really the worst thing.
yeah, that really saddened me when I heard that Canadians booed Americans at the at a hockey game,
Yeah,
right? I felt
very
disappointed.
sad.
I was like, I'm proud to be Canadian, but like we know it's not the American people that are
It's
putting
not
tariffs.
the American people, but these are war games. This is all, I don't know if you could call it saber rattling, but this is what happens. I've always
Yeah.
thought that sports is the precursor to war. Who you let play your games and how you salute their anthems and all that stuff. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, that's right. That's true, actually.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. So, yeah, I was I was listening to some interesting person talk about he had gotten he had interviewed cult recruiters, people, and he had to sign an NDA to like, not give away who his informants were, but like how they how they recruit people to join their cult or to join a cult. And one of the main ways that they do that is by giving them an identity,
Absolutely.
right?
And it's
Like,
not that hard to do with disaffected people.
right. It's like, and then that's the beginning, right? And our mammalian brain is like, yeah, that's who I am. I'm gonna fight.
That's right. That's exactly how it works. And that's how it's always worked.
Yeah.
And that's where I don't want to say anything political, but that's where our social safety net and the social safety net, let's just say that's where the social safety net in North America has failed too many people,
Mhm.
right? Because there's too many recruits out there.
Right. Too many disaffected people. Yeah. Yes. So tribalism, I think, is part of one of the things that we need to check ourselves around, right? Like it's good to feel proud of place you're in, but to also like, you know, not be a mammal about it.
Don't be such an animal. But we are animals. So, it's like Harari says, our superpower is not our aggression. Our superpower as humans is our ability to come together to solve problems,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
And that's what war does. It constellates identity for people to come together in small enough units so
Right.
they
Yeah.
can know what they're fighting for. And I think maybe humans like to fight. Maybe that's if you watch the the chimpanzee documentaries and you realize how close we are genetically. You know, I don't like to fight. I don't like that. I like to, call a spade, but I don't like to actually fight. I'd always rather make up. I'd always rather, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that sounds like the healthy side of Aries is to be able to define and communicate and clarify and, communicate clearly and, to debate in a healthy way.
That's right.
And then, of course, the negative side of Aries is full on aggression and
Well,
war,
think about the fact that Aries needs Libra,
right?
right? Libra is supposed to keep Aries in check. last year, or for, whatever, however many months, the 18 months or whatever, the nodes were in Aries and Libra, and we got less and less. The North Node was in Aries, and the South Node was in
Yeah,
Libra. We got less and less diplomacy and more war, right?
that's true.
And that
Yeah,
was my fear of those nodes. Now it's Pisces and Virgo nodes, right? And like there's going to be an eclipse on there's a lunar eclipse and a solar eclipse this month, but the lunar eclipse is in Virgo and Pisces, right? And that's on March 14th. And that's about the suffering of people, right? So the Ukrainians and all the people who are going to suffer from the trade war, all the fear. On the other hand, not on the other hand, but it is time that we stopped with the dominator. It is time. The dominator culture has to end.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so that's what's happening, right? And I don't know if does it end with eternal dominance? Not likely.
yeah. I mean, it does seem like it's an interesting setup that naturally after the nodes leave Aries and Libra that it would go into Pisces and Virgo, right?
Yeah.
Like the war, is healing
So
and
many people are going to suffer and die because of the US aid stuff that's not happening. Like
right,
unbelievable children and, pregnant women, and it's unspeakable. It's Pisces and Virgo for sure,
yeah.
right? And
So
so, and then you got these planets going into Aries, which is, more aggression, but there's aggression and there's assertiveness. And I certainly think Canada is trying to be assertive, not aggressive.
yes, I agree. Yeah,
Yeah. So, I don't know. But I think our little YouTube thing should be to encourage people individually who are tuning into us, because I doubt anyone in high places is listening.
right,
Or if they are, they wouldn't admit it. Um, I think that for those of us who are living through these times, there is something we can get from astrology to calm ourselves down, which is that what's required from us in March is that we don't push, that we don't panic, that we really allow for how we feel, Pisces, that we really allow for how we feel and that we really allow for how I feel, right? It's Pisces Aries combination.
right.
That we really take care of ourselves, not in that kind of, like, oh yes, you need the spa, but that we really take care of our anxiety levels and our fear levels and pay attention to where we feel aggressive and where we might feel assertive and what needs to get born and our fear that we won't be the one that survives. That's very strong with Aries.
Yeah,
Survival is very strong in an Aries
experience.
symbol. As an Aries symbol, yeah.
It's life, like as you mentioned, like Aries symbolizes life.
Right.
So it's
So if
very
I
that's
was ruled the world, I would gather
yeah.
us all together at the end of March and make a fire. We'd all sit around the fire and we'd cry and we'd tell stories and we'd cry and we'd let go and we'd honor the ancestors and we'd look at how people have survived through terrible times in patriarchy, like the last 2,000 years, the last 5,000, 10,000 years. We would look and see all those things that people have, like the witch burnings, the Inquisition, you know what I mean? Like terrible, terrible things, the plagues, you know, and we would look at the fact that how people made it through, and we would tell our stories, and then we would, you know, see what happens in April. Yeah.
Yeah. Like you said, you don't like fighting. You like to make your points, but then as a collective move forward, like to resolution,
Yeah. I
right? But
spent
I
my
think
whole
that's
life hating bullies and trying not to be hateful about it.
yes. I mean, we could say that bullies are, victims that feel entitled to be bullies.
Yeah, I do. And the only way you can handle your reaction to bullies is to find your inner bully. Take care of your inner bully, right? I've had to do I've spent a lot of time taking care of my inner bully, right? Because I don't like that part of me. So I don't want to admit to it, but we're on good terms now, and it's something else. It's a Yeah, in a sane person, in a person who isn't, a psychopath, that part of us that is so aggressive. I mean, you know this better than me. That part of us needs tenderness.
Yeah. 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 And then the dissolution of that defense, where they think they're going to die, and so they have to act that way.
Right. So I always tell people like parents of Aries children, don't don't think your Aries is independent and doesn't need you. Give them a strong foundation to push up against.
Yeah, that's interesting because I remember you saying that about Aries is that they're the first ones to, come in strong, but the first ones to kind of be like, ow, that hurt.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Right. Not that hurt me.
Yeah.
That's me. Yeah.
Yeah. So if we all learned these little astrological tips of how to deal with each sign, we all do a lot better for sure. I know it's helped me.
Astrology could save the world tonight. If everybody would just cool out and look at the charts, you would see
Mhm.
this is a real ridiculous thing we're in. But,
Yeah.
it's ridiculous. I mean, Brexit happened when Mars was stationary retrograde. Why didn't they just wait?
Why
They,
why didn't why didn't they consult their astrologer?
that's right.
Although
It was the
I
wrong day.
think the royal family has astrologers. I think they do.
I know they used to, but after Charles and Diana got married, I decided they didn't because
Oh, really?
nobody should have, any astrologer, no astrologer in their right mind would have approved of that marriage. Right. Yeah.
Okay, well, we're gonna make it through. We've got the eclipse on the 12th of March, 12th or
14th.
14th of
Yeah.
March.
The Ides of March. It's almost the Ides of March. Not that whatever. Yeah.
And that is a full moon eclipse. Is that
Yes. Lunar eclipse.
okay? And how does that look like in terms of
Well, that eclipse hooks Saturn. It's pretty close to and Saturn, and it trines Uranus, so it's pretty busy. I'd say it's busy enough. Um, it might move things in an unexpected direction,
okay?
toward needing to take care of the great suffering of people who can't afford to buy food and
Mhm.
who are going to become um, difficult to manage, I think, pretty quickly. Um, because I don't think there's any will in the government of the United States to take care of the people that they're disenfranchising, so to speak. Um, so there might be a radical, yeah, that full moon could be a radical rejigging of how people see things. It
Interesting.
towards the awareness of how much suffering is happening here.
Yeah,
Um,
that's interesting. Eclipses are known for their sort of like out of the blue, unexpected
yeah,
beginning.
they're portals. They open energies. And I have to say, I'll try and be neutral, but why should I? That eclipse squares Donald Trump's sun and moon.
Oh. Well, I was watching a astrology podcast, I think, and they did like a whole section on eclipses and people in power. And what I got from that whole thing was that basically people who rise to presidential and leadership roles, eclipses play a large part in both their charts and their rises and falls from power. Like
That
eclipses
is
are,
what they have always said. And for hundreds of years, eclipses, astrologers have been looking at eclipses for kings and stuff. Yeah, for sure.
yeah. And like, Obama had eclipses in his chart. Trump
There's always
has,
eclipses.
he's
And
always
if you remember that big eclipse that was visible in the United States, the one that cut right in 2017? That was
yeah,
Trump's. That was Trump got elected in 2016, and that eclipse was it, like the division in the United States. It was a wild eclipse. This eclipse is very personal to Donald Trump's chart in a very stressful way. Like it's not good for his health.
right.
I would say he's feeling stressed. Um,
Yeah, because it's in Pisces and Virgo and it's square.
yeah, but I just realized, give me a second, because I just realized that the United States has this degree in its chart, but I forget where. I think it's their Neptune. Uh, it's I always thought this was a very interesting thing about the United States chart, very undiscussed. That the United States chart has Mars at 21 degrees of Gemini and Neptune at 22 degrees of Virgo, which is very kind of, like wacko. It's why grifters, it's why the American, a sort of cowboy grifter thing is so strong, right?
Right.
And somewhere around the time that Obama got elected, the progressed, I'd have to check this out. The progressed Mars of the United States made a station and went retrograde. And I think it was conjunct the Neptune, like wacko
Okay.
shit. So, sorry, excuse my language, but wacko is kind of wacko energy, right?
Right.
This eclipse is activating that point.
Oh, wow. Okay. So things,
So we can't expect the United States to get any more uh, trustworthy or predictable or something. This is a very difficult thing to have in the chart of a country that you want to, that's your next door neighbor that you want to trust. And it's been good for years between the US and Canada.
yeah,
Um, but the fact that this eclipse is activating that and Donald Trump's sun and moon activate that is a kind of
thing to
interesting
watch.
thing. We're
Yeah,
all
that's for
waiting for the sheriff to show up and restore law and order. But it's not happening so far. Yeah.
that made me think of something. Um, well, this movement into Aries of Neptune does kind of harken back to the Civil War,
That's what
right?
they say. Yeah. That was when the American Civil War happened. Neptune was in Aries. I've heard that. I haven't done the research myself. I assume it's an astrology. It makes sense. 148 years ago.
Right. And
Yeah.
I don't think Canada and the States were copacetic back then. There was a war or something between us back
There was
then
the War of 1812, but that was before Neptune was in um Aries.
before Aries.
It
Okay.
was the 1860s, the Civil War.
Okay. Well, so in any case, Canada and United States have not always been friendly, but we've become friendly again. So, we have a relationship. There's ups and downs. There's
It's not always easy between friends. I mean, I think we all know that it's not like Americans who are doing this to Canada. Yeah. Anyway,
like
it's gonna go through some iterations, and I'm nervous about Neptune and Saturn in the sign of Aries, because Aries is a warrior sign. But I think for us as individuals, we should really consider aggression and assertiveness in our own reactions in this month, as well as how to lay down, how to admit and acknowledge our feelings for what seems to be lost or what's being lost.
that's a good focus because I think you're right. Like we do need to the natural state, in a cell division. It's natural for all of the or when the baby, gets fertilized and then all of the chromosomes go to either side before they
Right. Yes. Yes. Yes.
like, you need to be able to define yourself, define your ideas. You do need to be able to understand your position so that then you can start to actually communicate again, right? That's what we need to do in order to come
That
together.
is the big picture. That is the big thing. To actually have the age of Aquarius be what it's potentially could be is all about what you just said.
Yeah. And then yeah.
It's about bringing the left and the right hemispheres and the left and the right together.
Yeah. And we
Yeah.
have to be able to talk to each other in an assertive way. And as you know, I'm challenged by this too, in a well-articulated way without descending into violence or inflammation or,
Yeah.
fight. We need to be able to find those points where we can connect, where we can say like, okay, well, why do you think that? And like, well, what have you heard about that? And what, like, where we can start to come together and start to understand the other side because
And
it's
we can
so,
really only do that in small groups. We
yeah,
really can't do that on the internet very easily because there's all
yeah.
sorts of bad actors on the internet who get in the way of it. But
You
it's
are
really the
good.
conversation that we can have with each other and that's there's going to be more and more of that happening, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what we have to look forward to. And that work, the personal work, like you said, you know, um, really focus on how you can be assertive and articulate and defined without being
And
aggressive
have
as well.
feelings,
And have
those tender
feelings. Yeah.
feelings. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so that's our homework. That's everyone's homework.
Okay, so what do you think? Is that our
I think that's good for now. We'll tune in later when we're in the midst of end of March.
okay? Thank you for listening if you've been listening, and bye.
Bye.